going to do is I'm going to hit record on this event, and you're all going to get a message, and I hope you won't mind accepting the recording of today's event. We're going to share that as well after the event in case you miss a piece or want to re-watch it. Appreciate you doing that. Now, without further ado, let me introduce our panelists so we can jump into conversation today. Our first panelist is Kelsey Bannister. Kelsey joined the Kroenke Sport and Entertainment team in 2015 as the Director of Membership Services for the Denver Nuggets. In 2019, Kelsey was promoted to her current position as the Vice President of Premium Client Services, where she is responsible for overseeing all premium spaces and clients at both the Pepsi Center and Dick's Sporting Goods Park, which includes 4 professional sports teams and all third-party events and concerts. Prior to moving to Denver, Kelsey was with the Houston Rockets organization for 6 seasons as their premium services manager. She also spent time on the building side at Toyota Center coordinating third-party events, Rockets basketball, and much more. Kelsey received her bachelor's degree in marketing and her master's degree in sports management at Baylor. She also played volleyball for the Bears from 2005 to 2008. Welcome, Kelsey.
Thank you. Looking forward to the conversation.
Our second panelist today will be Desiree Guilliard-Young. Desiree is the Chief Operating Officer and Chief Human Resources Officer at Sanctuary Fitness, which is an established 40-plus employee, multi-location small business in Los Angeles. Desiree's career path includes a role as the Chief of Staff at ADP, which focused on operational excellence for a global workforce of more than 400 employees. She also served as the Global Operations Manager with AT&T, where she designed and executed world-class sales operations for a 10,000-person sales organization. Desiree has a bachelor's degree from Baylor, where she actually played volleyball with Kelsey, which is pretty cool. She also has an MBA from Georgia Tech and a Global Business Leadership Certificate from Beijing University. And I have to give Desiree credit. She is extremely passionate about connecting professionals and about career development within the Baylor family. And she actually played a huge role in the idea that eventually sparked this event. Desiree, welcome.
Thank you for having me. You're too kind, but thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And our final panelist today is Mark Mitford. Mark joins us with more than 20 years of experience working as an HR executive in mid-sized to Fortune 50 companies with specific strengths in talent management, leadership development, coaching, employee engagement, and various other critical business practices. During his career, Mark has worked with PepsiCo, Ericsson, Nortel, Texas Instruments, and Safeco. He also has led several enterprise-wide transformations, including culture change and IT transformational change at Fortune 500 companies. Currently, Mark is the founder and owner of his HR strategic consulting company called HR Catalyst Consulting. The company focuses on small to mid-market companies in need of human capital leadership to drive their continued growth and success. Mark is also a Baylor grad, and he is very proud of his 2 daughters who are also recent Baylor grads. Mark, welcome.
Great, thanks Ryan, glad to be here.
So as we jump into today's conversation, Mark, I'm gonna start with you since I just read your last, but would all 3 of you mind speaking to your experience as a hiring manager throughout your career, as a builder of professional teams, and then also maybe talk about how networking, professional development, how those types of things have played into the success of your career and the success of the different companies that you've worked and been a part of.
Sure, kind of a lot of a lot of questions there embedded, Ryan, but no, thanks for the opportunity to share a couple of experiences there. So I've actually been in the field of human resources for actually this year is it's hard to believe, but it's actually I started in 1990. Formally in my career after a master's degree. So when it comes down to hiring managers, I think the key thing you need to, what I would really look for is really going back to passion and drive of the individual. You know, especially for because I do have 2 newer grads. They were both 2018 undergrads, and one just finished her master's degree. So I think it's really a lot of times, especially since there are a lot of younger grads on the phone call here, I would say the key thing is to really focus on what are you truly passionate about? What do you really love to do? Because I think in a lot of cases, people may feel like they're kind of a little bit, they're a little bit fixated because they have a degree in a certain major and that's all they can do. But, I always think about too, don't just think about when you're looking for an opportunity, also look at the company. The other big thing I would tell people do is do a lot of research on the company and find it, is that a company you really want to work for? Do they have a good culture, a set of core values? And really look for not just the technical side of the job, but also, is this a company that you could really see yourself working for long term? And even today, I know with a lot of millennials out there, long term is really, it used to be when I started my career, working for 10 or 20 years for the same company was really a good thing. But I think now it's actually fine, I think, for people to explore, especially if you're in your 20s and 30s. If you find you don't like a job after 2 years or so, or 3 years, it's okay to look around because the right job is out there. So really be passionate about it. The other thing I was going to just touch on really quickly there and then turn it over to some of the other panelists was really about the power of networking. I honestly have to say that I was pretty ignorant about the power of networking when I started off in my career. And I think nowadays, just like we're doing today, we have many people on. I think there's at least 40 something participants on now, just a quick glance. But we have people from all over the nation. So it doesn't matter where you are. I think the other big thing to do is to really leverage your different networks. If you work in accounting, leverage accounting networks. If you work, also making sure you leverage the Baylor community, because I think the other big thing is really huge is that, I'm very blessed to live in Dallas Fort Worth area. And so there's literally thousands of Baylor alum that are in DFW, but I'm sure with Desiree and also with Kelsey, they can ring true. There's a lot of alum that come out of Colorado and actually California too. So make sure and I think I've been very fortunate that a handful of times, kids that are looking at graduating soon or have just graduated out of Baylor have reached out to me. And I would say anybody who reaches out to me who we share that same connection of the Baylor green and gold, I'm happy to meet with them for coffee or lunch. And nowadays, of course, maybe just over Zoom, but really just working with them to connect with them, just trying to find out a little more about what they really want to do. And I would jokingly say at my age, I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do when I grow up. So just because you just started your career, maybe you're 22 or 25, don't feel like you have to have everything figured out, because I'm sure the other panelists too will tell you some interesting things about their career trajectory. And 7 years ago, if you told me I would have started my own business, I would have told you were kind of stark raving crazy, because I was always a career HR guy, so I know nothing about business. And I've been, I think I've been fairly blessed and very, successful in my business and really love what I do today. Thanks.
Appreciate that, Mark, very much. Desiree, let's go to you to talk about kind of your experience as a hiring manager and with networking and those types of things from a high level perspective to kick us off.
Absolutely. So I've been extremely fortunate and blessed in the fact that I've had opportunities to hire in different capacities for companies of multiple sizes, right? And one of the things that I feel like is a common denominator is just the individual talent and what you bring to the table, what sets you apart, what makes you special, and more importantly, how you individually add value in a meaningful and tangible way. And so it's more than soft skills, it's more than personality, it's more than being a great fit for the culture. It's what problems are you solving? What unique skill sets do you offer to the organization or the team to help round them out and be more strategic, think forward from a vision and strategy perspective, but also anticipate risk and be creative. I mean, we'll get to this later, but I'm in a very unique industry that's been heavily impacted by COVID and a lot that's been going on a national and global level. And so one of the things that I pride myself in is surrounding myself with people that are smarter than me, that think differently. And I think a lot of the times we as potential hires, regardless of where you are in your career, have this misconception of the fact that I have to fit a certain mold or be a certain type of new hire or employee to be considered for an opportunity. Well, what was true 15 to 20 years ago has fundamentally shifted. People are looking for folks to join their organizations that have broad perspective, a variety of skill sets, and think differently than what they're common to experiencing, because it broadens the scope and the impact of what their organization is capable of. And so those are just high level characteristics that I always look for when I'm building a team, when I'm consulting executives on building their teams, or interviewing specific candidates for various roles within a company. When it comes to networking and professional development, it's everything, but it has to be strategic and intentional. And you have to make sure that you understand what your objectives are, who you're targeting and why, and that you actually execute on what you say you're going to do and maintaining those connections in an authentic way. I've been working for 10 plus years, and 100% of the jobs that I've had throughout my career have come from my network. They have been roles that proactively sought me, that I didn't have to go looking to find. And that's not to say that I wasn't in periods where I was laid off or periods where I was proactively looking for my next lateral position, but I hope that speaks to the importance of building authentic connections, maintaining those connections, and then making sure that people truly understand who you are, what your brand is, and the value that you can potentially bring.
That's awesome, Desiree. Thank you for that. And Kelsey, let's go to you to wrap up this first question.
Absolutely. Well, I think Mark and Des hit all the big points. So to echo what you both have said, and just to reiterate, I came from a position where I just had full-time members, and most recently now I have a group of full-time and part-time. So looking at the strategy of who I'm looking to hire based on what position, I think it's equally as important for you who are interviewing. You have to interview the company and make sure it is a good fit for you. There are some great questions you can find online. I'm sure we have some resources too to make sure you are also interviewing that company and that boss to make sure it's a good fit for you and who you are as a person. In addition, Des, I think you said a culture fit. I look for culture enhancers. How are you going to enhance my culture on my team and not just kind of fit in? I want to drive and make people have that effort and make sure that we're going to something bigger and better and not just sitting back and kind of fitting in. So looking for that type of personality, looking for the drive that, will actually help my team. In addition, like looking at how do you stand out against the competition? Because so often we get resumes upon resumes, looking at people, and working in the sports world, I'm a big fan of XYZ team. Can you hire me? And it's like, I don't want that. I want to have someone that can actually come in and make an impact on the business side, as much as being that secret fan, as we like to call it, so you can actually get some work done as well. So those are some of the biggest things. And in the sports world and in many different realms that I've worked in, it's all about who you know. And it's not just who you know of connections on LinkedIn. It's about building a genuine relationship with that person, starting with, hey, how can I help you? Instead of, hey, I'm reaching out for you to help me. Because people can see directly through that. If you're calling, hey, I saw a position was open, you want to hire me? It's like, no, I don't know who you are. So start with genuine conversations. I think that's something COVID has taught all of us of, let's do a genuine check-in and see how people are doing, and not just making that connection to benefit yourself. So that's kind of the overview of some of quick suggestions. And I know we'll dive into some of the details on that too.
Yeah, that's great, Kelsey. I appreciate that as well. So you all, everybody's here to talk about networking. You all touched on this a little bit. And it's funny, one of the things we asked guests to do when they signed up for the event was submit questions if they had them for you all to answer. And that was the biggest thing that came through. We had various versions of the same question being, how do you market or how do you network, particularly during a pandemic or during a time when we're basically forced to be in a virtual world? So I'd love to hear from each of you to talk about how networking has changed over the last 6 to 8 months. And Desiree, I wanted to go to you first, not only to focus on how networking has changed, but one of the specific questions was how to build a network in a new city. And I know that obviously you are fairly new to where, to your position and those types of things. So would you mind speaking to that?
Absolutely, absolutely. So this will be my fifth move across country for an opportunity where I knew absolutely no one or had a very small social and personal and professional network. And so the biggest thing that I can say is take advantage of your second and third degree network. And so thinking about the exposure groups that you have within your existing first level network. And so that's going to be university affiliations, professional organizations, women in technology, groups that you identify with, sororities, fraternities, but also within your professional network, being aware of their extended network, where they have a presence, where their connections lie, because you never know who the people that you're closest with or have a relationship with have a connection to. So my strategy when I moved to LA for the second time was to reach out to those individuals. And so I had a handful of folks that had existing presence in LA, reaching out and reestablishing connections, or, opening that conversation up to let them know that you're going to be in market, but also looking for professional organizations that you might not have specifically targeted in the past that makes sense. And so COVID has changed how we network, especially when you're relocating to a new state, because everything is through technology or some sort of a medium. Nothing is in person. But hopefully that doesn't discourage you, because now we're in a unique space where people are very much hungry for connection and more open to conversation than they ever would have been in the past because of these restrictions. And so the advice that I would give people that are relocating to a new state where they don't have a presence is, first, take advantage and engage your existing network through those 4 mediums that I talked about, but definitely put it on the radar of mentors, peers, advocates, friends, family, to get an understanding of where their extended network is, what they do, and what connections they can make, warm connections electronically or otherwise, they can make on your behalf so that you start to form those relationships. And then lastly, for me personally, joining operations and HR in a new state, I immediately went to the professional organizations in the state that represented my functional area. So SHRM, PIRA, Women in Technology, reaching out to the board, reaching out to the local chapter members, getting on the calendar, being added to those newsletters, and asking for warm introductions is the best way to really get a presence established and a network built in a new city and state.
Hey, Kelsey, what about, we had a specific question about people that are interested in moving kind of laterally or even moving up within a certain company, maybe not in the exact same, position or maybe not a direct move up. I know that you have moved around a little bit within, different sports organizations and things, maybe not the exact same as what they're asking, but I'm curious if you can speak to, networking and creating those opportunities internally.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and something that I've had to learn to do in my career a lot, even moving within an organization, having so many different teams. So I think the most important part is kind of going back to the genuine relationships. First and foremost, when you start wanting to network, you think, I need to know the VP or the CEO of that company. Keep in mind that don't just focus on those individuals. They are very important individuals to focus on, but also the receptionist, the coordinators, every level of the company. You never know the impact that person can make, especially if you're looking to shift within. So one of the lessons I learned really early on, I had a great first boss when I was doing my internship. I was forced to work with every single department in the building, which was great by default, but then it was up to me to figure out, how do I build these genuine relationships with these people? Because I have to work with them on game nights and event nights, but then having that friendship really transpire and that relationship helped me build those gaps, and in the end helped me make my job a lot easier. So it really is, I say this saying all the time, and it's cliche, but start being comfortable being uncomfortable. It's never easy to start that first conversation of, hi, I've never met you. Nice to see you. But it really does start with small, genuine conversations. It starts with reaching out and being kind of hesitant, because the more you start doing that, it becomes natural, and you'll find in your career as you move along that the relationships you build are what truly make your job great, and also easier from a standpoint if you're even to look moving internally at your own company. So I also say never, I think someone also asked the question about, well, my degree, what if I don't find something in my degree? I think the stat was like only 26% of people end up doing what their degree says. So don't let that hold you down of thinking, oh, I have to follow this, or I have a lot of people that start in sales that want to go work on the service side or other departments. Don't ever be afraid to take that leap, even if you start in a different position than you even expected to be. I think that's the big key takeaways, I would say.
Hey, Mark, we also received quite a few questions, again, specific to networking, but about if someone wanted to make a complete career change. And I think it was interesting what Kelsey just said about becoming comfortable in uncomfortable settings, if you will. But you also spoke and kind of joked about how your career has taken on many different twists and how you didn't think you'd ever be the owner of a company. So I was wondering if you can speak, again, kind of generally to networking, but also to those people that are thinking about totally changing up what they're doing.
Sure. Yeah, happy to, Ryan. So, yeah, I think the biggest thing there is interesting to hear what both Desiree and Kelsey were saying, because I definitely echo them. I would say that, and it's kind of interesting because I've actually been talking to a couple of executives who are, have been in the work world for let's say 20 plus years now. And it's interesting because I would say one of the key things you should do is instead of building a resume that's focused on just your titles, you can actually you can actually transform your resume to be more of a competency based resume and really focus on things that maybe it's around. You're really focused on teamwork and collaboration. Maybe you've done a lot of work in project management, and that may not be your title, but you've actually led, and even let's say you're an accountant by profession. Maybe you've led some large projects and you've been on a project team and you've had to collaborate a lot and do a lot of presentations. So I would say for somebody who's thinking about, because again, I think, you may come out with your degree and you really feel like, well, now I'm stuck. I have to be this for the rest of my career. And I would say that some of the most successful executives and leaders and mentors that I've ever met, you look at their career and it is just a zigzag and it's all over the place. But everywhere you look at too, I think if you're looking internally, as we heard too from Desiree and Kelsey, I'd say look at jobs that are going to be really strategic moves for you. So don't just think that career development has to be a vertical move, that you just simply have to continue to go this way in your career. Be thinking about this, this lateral move may help me to be much stronger to make that vertical move in 2 years. So I think the key thing is, even if you're whatever, if you're 23, 28, think about strategically, where would I like to be in the next 3 to 5 years? And what kind of experiences, what do I need to learn? Where are some areas that I have gaps in my resume or my skill set that I can actually shore up by taking this lateral move that'll help to make me stronger long term? So there's a much greater probability you'll get there within 3 to 5 years from now. The last thing I was going to say there very quickly is, I was with some very large companies that were Fortune 100. And it was just very interesting because some people who were very senior, in all ways, they looked very successful. They they had a big title, they had a big salary, but they were stuck because their career had purely been vertical and they had nowhere else to go. And the person who was that next above them might have been 40 years old or 35 and they weren't going anywhere. So I would say one of the key things that made it successful for people to do much earlier in their career, like a lot of folks on this session today, is really think very strategically and make some of those lateral moves that'll give you much more breadth of experience, because that will really pay out for you tenfold, maybe in 3, 5, 7 years down the road. Thanks.
That's great, Mark. Appreciate that. So speaking of that kind of professional development, I know you were talking in terms of kind of specific career moves into new jobs and things like that, but I'm curious if each of you can speak to, and I guess Kelsey, will go to you first this time, speak to what types of professional development opportunities you're encouraging your employees to take advantage of right now, particularly during this kind of virtual period we're in.
Absolutely. And I think Des said it earlier, and I agree with her. I think COVID has shown us challenges, but through that, opportunities like this to actually do a virtual engagement and getting to know other people across the country. We're not all in the same city, in the same room. That is something I've encouraged my staff to look at from this perspective too. So what I have done on a professional side and had my team do, every month I have them reach out to 2 professionals, one within our industry and one outside of our industry. It can be LinkedIn, it can be through connections. Number one is A, building the network that we've been talking about, but then B, what are we missing from other industries that are going through some of the same stuff we're going through that can really help us when we start opening our doors again and having fans? What can we adapt from hotels, from restaurants, from all these industries that are similar to us, but we've never really looked at from that mindset? So that's number one, of just building that professional network. And then I also challenge them once a month to do a personal goal. So even let's say you're not working for an organization right now, or you're in between jobs, set that challenge for yourself and find, how can I set a goal for myself every month to reach out to people in professions I'm interested in or outside of what I'm normally doing. That's a really big opportunity you can do on a personal level. In addition, a lot of universities are coming out with free online courses. It has been something, it's probably been there. I just never looked it up until we've been working from home for so long. But take advantage of those. There's some great universities coming out with free resources. LinkedIn has some online training. So there's unlimited resources right now, and they're just growing as we are still sitting at home working. So do some research online. And Ryan, you can probably let us know if Baylor has any of those, but I do know that some universities across the country right now are coming out with spectacular career development opportunities, in addition to the networking as well that I'm having my team do. Oh, I think you're in mute. Yeah.
And, Desiree and Mark, what would you guys like to add to that?
Ladies first.
Oh, you're so sweet. Such a gentleman. So I'm not going to reiterate anything that Kelsey mentioned, because she brought up some excellent points regarding the resources that are now free that normally would have a monthly recurring charge or some type of upfront expense associated with them. I challenge my leadership team individually and then with their direct reports to have professional development sessions once a month. And so this is something that you can do independent of any guidance from your direct supervisor or boss, but sitting down and coming up with an individual development plan. So to Mark's point, where do you see your career in 6 months and where do you see it in 2 to 3 years? Because I think anything past that at this point, if you aren't set on a very firm and defined path, it's a little challenging in this current environment to think past that. But if you are, and you're an executive and you're seasoned with 15 plus years of experience, then definitely want to be considering your 3 to 5 year plan from a progression and development perspective. But for my folks and my direct reports, it's sitting down and understanding, what are your key strengths? So we're huge on strength-based assessments. I think a lot of companies err on the side of assessing weaknesses or areas of development. And let's be honest, we are who we are functionally, professionally. You can only bill out your gaps or your weak areas so much from a capacity perspective. So why waste energy focusing extensive amounts of time on a skill set or an area that's just going to basically reach a certain capacity and stay there from a development perspective. And so understanding your unique strengths, understanding what sets you apart from a value proposition perspective, and then building a development plan around that that's in alignment with your career aspirations or the experience that you're looking to get as you progress in your career. And so the tools that I recommend people use, I'm a huge Myers-Briggs person. I'm a huge strength-based assessment person. And I'm very much a supporter of having hard goals that have milestones, tasks, timelines, and deliverables so that there's an accountability element on your end. And so really understanding that and then taking advantage of building out your soft skills. This is a really great time. COVID-wise, this is one of the few positive things that we can take from this time, is the fact that we have a lot more ability and free time to explore and to learn in conventional and non-conventional ways. So whether that's brushing up on basic skills, Excel, Visio, Adobe, data analytics, strategic thinking, taking courses, getting certified, or stepping outside of yourself in your comfort zone if you're looking to make a lateral move and working on a strategic project that exposes you to another area of the business to get you that indirect experience. Now's the time to do that. And so I challenge my team to come up with 2 to 3 goals a quarter that we work aggressively towards. And then there's corresponding deliverables that they come up with and plans and milestones that they map out based off of what they want to accomplish, both short and long term.
Mark, was there something else you wanted to add to that as well? You know, the only thing, because those were all great points. So the only thing I would add is that actually a couple of the client organizations I work with is kind of interesting. We've actually been doing a kind of a virtual book club, for lack of a better term. So we've actually been taking a couple of books. One of them, one of my clients in Dallas, we just did Radical Candor by Kim Scott, which is a great book. And yeah, so and it's again, it's somebody who was a very successful female executive in Northern California with a lot of, you know, the who's who of the tech giants. So that's a great book just to look through, and it just teaches, again, it's amazing how many companies that I work with too that are smaller, that they just there's a whole thing about the art of communication that so many companies get so wrong. And you have some people who are really gifted at what they do, who are significant business leaders who just can't communicate their way out of a wet paper bag. So that's one of them. The other thing I would say too, and it just kind of popped up actually on this session, was even if you do something like a classic is like Who Moved My Cheese? So if you wanted to do that, and that book, it's hilarious. It's a super quick read. It even has a few pictures in it. And so if you don't want anything too academic, but it's a good book, which is kind of like a foundational book on change management. So you could do this within your team because as we've heard, and I think every one of us who is working right now or not, or maybe underemployed or unemployed, you're going through some level of change management. But if you are working on a team, maybe doing something as simple as doing a book review of Who Moved My Cheese, and then just talking about the dynamics of change management, and just sharing to whatever level people are comfortable with the emotional side of what they're going through from a change, because some people are just going through a really tough time right now, and it's all the way down to the core of financials. But some of them are just, they're worried about their job because their organization have cut back. So maybe doing, the good old fashioned kind of book of the month club. You can either do it in person or maybe virtually with a handful of your either friends or work associates. And I think that would be very healthy just to keep that community going.
Thank you, Mark. And we tied in a handful of those books that Mark mentioned, and then Desiree wrote in a couple of other really good ones as well. So check that chat, the chat box, and you can go through some of those. Let's see. I was just reading some of the comments. Let's keep the discussion going. Let's talk about marketing yourself a little bit. I'm interested to get your guys' take on what are some of the keys to being a great self-promoter? So that goes into networking a little bit, but I'm thinking, resume tips, personal websites, LinkedIn, those types of things. I mean, what do you guys think are the tools to really self-promoting yourself? And let's go with Desiree to start this one.
Absolutely. So when it comes to self-promotion, I think it starts with you, the individual. You're the product. And so making sure that you have a firm understanding of who you are, your unique value proposition, what you do, what makes you unique from any and every other candidate. And more importantly, what you're looking to accomplish and why is key. Because when you're forming these new connections, you're not going to have 30 to 40 minutes. You might, but you probably won't have 45 minutes to an hour to really go into the weeds regarding your experience. And so being very succinct, very precise, very clean in terms of your delivery and what sets you apart is important. And then when it comes to marketing yourself, have an understanding of your brand. And you hear a lot of people talk about brand, it's a buzzword, but you want to understand how you're internally and externally perceived. So what are people saying when you're not in the room? What do people say about the quality of your work, your professionalism, your executive presence, your ability to communicate, handle conflict, partner? All of that affects your overall value proposition and who you are, which ultimately can negatively or positively impact your ability to market yourself internally and externally. And then if you think about tools, getting creative. LinkedIn is a great resource that's traditional, that everyone has always used, and it's effective if used properly. But you also want to think about external proactive opportunities to market yourself. And so when I talked in the beginning about professional organizations, alumni organizations, if you're a member of a sorority or fraternity, nonprofits, if your company is large enough and you have an employee resource group, an ERG, understanding if there are leadership opportunities within those spaces, how you can add value, and being willing to take a risk and self-nominate and stepping into projects, roles in these non-traditional environments, because I've used them in my personal career to build out skill set. So I started as a sales executive, was promoted to a senior sales executive, and then bounced around from HR to operations to business development. And I leveraged employee resource groups. I leveraged projects with other stakeholders and other organizations to show and to demonstrate, yes, I may not have traditional experience in this functional area, but look at this ERG that I worked with and the strategic work that we did and the initiatives that I developed and managed and implemented to show parallel between a role that I was applying for, being considered for, and experience that they were requiring from a selection criteria perspective. And so really think broadly about how you market yourself and be mindful of how you present yourself externally through technology and social media, because I can tell you as a hiring manager, I'm the FBI. I look at everything. So Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, what did you like, post, comment on, who are you following? What are your thoughts in terms of what you're posting and the context and the content in which you are communicated and how? Hiring managers look at everything, and you don't want to do something that will exclude you from an opportunity or that you will regret later. So being non-conventional, being aware of your digital presence, and then not being afraid to step outside of your comfort zones and look for those non-traditional opportunities would be my feedback.
Hey, Mark, what are some of your thoughts on kind of promoting yourself and marketing yourself? And then I'm also curious along those same lines, just about some of the top kind of skills that you see that people might be able to bring to the table. To Desiree's point, about finding your real value and what you bring. What do you see as some of the top skills that people you've interviewed and worked with can kind of bring to the table?
Sure, I would say the first thing there, Ryan, would be that it's got to be, it's interesting because when you talk about self-promotion, I think that I also talk about humility. So I think a lot of us kind of like you kind of struggle with this. It's almost like you're fighting yourself. So the one thing I love to ask too, whenever I interview people, and to me, I don't know, it may be a stock question now, but it's almost, I always ask people, of course, tell me an experience that you're the most proud of. What did you do? Something in your career, what are you the most proud of? That one's one I think, a lot of people are ready for that one. But then I flip it around, and the next question I ask is, tell me about a project you were worked on or you led that you failed at. And so what was the failure? What occurred? And also, more importantly, what did you learn from that experience? So I think in self-promoting, kind of following that train of thought, be thinking about, because I think of all of us, especially, the panelists and a lot of people that are on this session today, you've all had experiences where you've screwed something up, for lack of a better term, and something didn't turn out the way you wanted it to. But make sure that you also highlight, hey, this is something I didn't do that well, or it didn't turn out as well as I thought it would. But make sure you focus on the learning experience. And so what did you learn from that experience? Because I hate to say, but I would guarantee you some of the best, and we're talking about, we've got a couple of athletes on the panel here. Some of the best things you learned are your failures. I had failures. I was a walk-on at Baylor and in track, but it was I very quickly became humbled to figure it out. I was never going to be a scholarship athlete at Baylor because of just because I didn't have that God-given talent in that sixth gear to run a 400 and the types of speeds I was seeing. So I learned a very good lesson in humility. So learn to focus on that. And the other thing I would say, just from in marketing yourself, and actually, if folks wanted resources and they're in Dallas, I'm happy to share some other resources in a group I'm a part of called Business Navigators. But the other big thing we've been doing is actually focus on really hone your 30-second elevator pitch. Because I think, a lot of recruiters are going to reach out to you and they're going to blind call you, or they're going to want to do a quick Zoom meeting and they're going to ask you, so tell me about yourself. And, that's kind of like when you're segueing into that 30-second elevator pitch. And I would say personally that I may give myself a lot of days on a good day, maybe a C minus. But I would say get that down and really become very adept at that, especially if you're underemployed right now, or you're looking for a job, or you're trying to leave a job and you got your resume out there, or you're putting open opportunities out there on LinkedIn. Really do some of the basics of getting that 30-second elevator pitch on Zoom. You can record yourself. And it's really funny. Anybody's recorded themselves and listened to themselves like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I sound like that. So even get some of the basics down to make sure it comes across very crisply, because you never know when that recruiter is going to be calling about this perfect opportunity, or maybe through your network, as we talked about earlier, somebody may reach out from your network and said, hey, I'm so-and-so, I've got a job opportunity I'm interested in. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself? And so it could be even at 6 o'clock at night when you're having your dinner, and all of a sudden you may decide, oh my gosh, I've got to go into my pitch. So make sure you get that down really well, and so it rolls off your tongue just as smooth, kind of as smooth as silk.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great feedback. Kelsey, what could you add to the kind of marketing yourself, or specific skills or things like that that make applicants stand out?
Yeah, I'm going to give you guys some tangible stuff that I personally look for, especially on the resume side. There are some positions we post and we get 900 applicants. So when I'm going through those resumes, the big things that stand out to me is, number one, what numbers are you showing to support your efforts? Even if you aren't in sales, even if you're like, that's not what I'm doing, but how many people have you managed? Put that number on there. How big is the organization you work for? What events have you hosted? I think we kind of shy away from numbers. I worked on a project, great. How much revenue was brought in from that project? Going back to Mark's point, it's hard for us to kind of promote ourselves sometimes, but this is the one time to really brag about yourself and showcase that on a resume. I encourage people to have two versions of their resume. I have one that's 3 pages long, which is aggressive, but each of those jobs I've had, I segment those bullet points out based on the job that I'm applying for. Having that standard resume that you submit, have it actually look at the job description you're applying for, pull the bullet points that make sense for that job, and not just a blanket resume. So be willing to adjust that resume based on the job that you're going for, and not just have that standard one that you have, because that's a really big one. I took notes because there's a lot of really good stuff. Des, I back you up completely. Social media, it's the first thing we look at. And I highly encourage, I tell people before I hire them and after, you don't just represent the organization when you're on the clock. It's also off the clock. So if you are at dinner or at a happy hour, like, make sure you stay true to who you are as a person. Because that's really good life advice, but then you never want that to reflect poorly on your current job or as you move up in any organization. So making sure you stay true to who you are is very important. In addition to that, translating into the interview, there are times where I've interviewed people asking something simple. Have you worked with PowerPoint before? Oh yes, I'm an expert. Okay, and then you start learning, oh, they actually don't know it. It's okay not to know everything. I'm looking for someone that's trainable. I can show them the skills I want them to learn, and actually being able to admit, I don't know that. I look for someone like that more than someone that thinks they know it, but they actually don't. And then 6 months into me trying to train them, it's a longer process. So biggest thing is be true to who you are, in the office, outside the office. Social media is such a big feature now in our world. I'm still trying to get used to it. I'm not there yet. And then LinkedIn as well. It's something I personally am trying to get better at through COVID, is making sure you check your LinkedIn. It is still a great resource to use, especially when you're connecting to professionals in the world. So make sure your LinkedIn's up to date. Make sure you're checking your inbox on a regular manner. And don't be afraid to follow up with people if they haven't responded, because we all get busy, especially as we have busy lives and busy jobs. So if you reach out to someone, don't be afraid that next week or two, hey, just following up on my message, wanted to make sure you received it. I never take that as an insult. I'm like, thank you, I completely missed it. So just some quick, tangible stuff that I think we can take away from this today.
And then Ryan, real quick, if I may, Kelsey, you brought something to mind that I meant to bring up. So I saw there were questions about, should I reach out to recruiters? How many pages should my resume be? Any type of hiring manager within HR is going to be using an ATS solution. So it's basically an application that checks your resume for critical words and experience specific to the role that you're doing. And so for me personally, I have an Excel document that outlines all of the experience that I have by functional area. So whether it's HR, a specific skill set, and then the tangible bullets that I've been able to either demonstrate or measurable results, it's all listed in that document, so that when it comes time to create a new resume, because you should be creating a resume for the job that you're applying to. Don't just use the same one, to Kelsey's point. You have to tailor it. But when it comes to applying to a new position, I can sort by functional area depending on the role, and then use that as the foundational step to build my resume. But there are very much applications that look for keywords. So really make sure that you're going through that job description with a fine-tooth comb and highlighting specific key elements, key themes that you need to incorporate or demonstrate or display in your actual resume. Rule of thumb, I don't really mind a 2-page resume, especially if someone has 10 plus years of experience, because that's just the expectation. Quite honestly, if you're an established professional, your resume is going to be longer because your experience is broad. So there's really for me personally as a hiring manager, I'm fine with 2 pages, but you should be able to summarize your experience. If I can get my 12 years on 2, unless you have more, so can you. And then lastly, with LinkedIn and reaching out to recruiters, that's another network that I forgot to mention when we were having the conversation regarding brand and marketing and networking. Recruiters are your best friend. Hiring managers are connected to recruiters. Recruiters are going to know about opportunities sometimes before they even are posted externally or internally, depending on the relationship that they have with the organization, whether they're an internal recruiter or a contractor for hire, or a small business owner that supports a large company from a recruiting and placement perspective. So you want to make sure that you're not just focusing on your network or the network of your network, but also reaching out to recruiters to set up time. And I've done this throughout my entire career. If I'm looking for new opportunities or interested in a role, I will reach out to that recruiter and say, hey, listen, I saw this opportunity, but really interested in understanding your placement and talent sourcing strategy for the fiscal year. Here's some areas that I'm interested in, would love to have a 15 to 20 minute chat over coffee when we could do that now virtually, so that you're at least starting the conversation. Because if you wait until a hiring manager posts something on LinkedIn externally, there's like a 15 to 20%, Mark, keep me honest, turnover rate of someone actually being placed from an external job posting once it's been posted, because it's all about relationships and who you know. So you want to get yourself on the front end of that cycle and connect with people that can make the decisions from a hiring perspective early on in the process. And so recruiters and hiring managers and associates that are associated with people in those roles is going to be key.
I wanted to just tell people we only have a few minutes left in our allotted time today. So if you have some rapid fire questions, I want to throw them in the chat real quick. I want to be respectful of everybody's time, but we did have one quick one if one of you wanted to touch on this. Actually, now 2 quick ones. One is, what's the best way to represent multiple positions held at the same company to show you've been working your way up?
I'll chime in on this. So what I personally have done on my resume, I have the company at the very top, and then underneath that company, I put my most current role. And then under the same company title, I have the role I had prior. So that's the way I personally done it. Mark can probably give even better advice than I have. But just to show that I'm still at that same organization, and I've been there 6 years, but here's my 3 promotions or 2 promotions during that time frame is how I have it on my resume.
Yeah, the only other thing I'd say there, Kelsey, is no, that's great because a lot of times too on your resume, if you worked for, I worked at PepsiCo, so you said I worked for PepsiCo from 2010 to 2014, then you could quickly bulletize, yeah, put, I worked as a product manager, then I worked as a senior product manager. The other key thing there to do is, and I think everybody's brought it up today, is what were some of the key learning experiences you had in each of those roles? So what were some things, were they bigger accounts? Were they more complex jobs that you worked on? And I love the idea too about the numbers. And I think Kelsey brought up metrics, which are awesome. Because again, I think all of us can have very fluffy looking resumes. So, the fluff is great, but if you have a really savvy manager, they're looking for they're looking for driving results, and make sure that you put some numbers to everything you do, whether you're in HR or sales or accounting, put numbers driven, because that's what people I think really focus on, and that's what's going to catch a hiring manager's attention.
We also got a question that says, what follow-ups do you suggest to do after an informational interview to maintain a better, more genuine connection with those people?
So Ryan, I'll take this one. So first and foremost, you want to thank them for their time, thank them for the opportunity and the conversation. But walking away with, this is what I took away from our conversation, whether it was key learnings or critical information regarding the conversation details, and then have corresponding next steps for follow up in terms of what you're going to be doing with that relationship and reaching out to them. And then things that you're going to be doing independently between that first meeting and the second or follow up meeting down the road, even if you haven't scheduled it officially. And so also be succinct, get to the point, don't make it a novel. You want it to be very organized and structured because it comes off more professional. It's easier to read, but that would be my suggestion.
It's great feedback. One more question, and then
Hey, Ryan, can I jump in there too? Sorry about that, but I was gonna, the other thing too, to that point that Desiree just brought up is, if you find this, you're finding this person that's really, they are in a really senior job and this and that, and they're a decision maker. Another nice thing you may ask is, who else in your network would you recommend that I talk to? So, and don't ask for, and a lot of times even better perhaps is not even just leaving it open-ended, but maybe asking me, are there 2 to 3 people in your network, or are there 1 to 3 people in your network that, and again, after you make them, this was a great session, are there a handful of people in your personal network that you would recommend I talk to? And would you be willing to make a warm introduction? So that's another great way to expand and talk to some, really move up to some key decision makers in different organizations.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. That's a great point as well. So we do have one more question that was sent in by a guest. I want to be respectful again of everybody's time. So we understand if you're tuning in and need to sign off, we do understand that. But someone asked, what's the best way to reach out to recruiters and hiring managers? Kind of a quick one, but if anyone had some insight into that.
I'll take it quickly. So recruiters, you have to get savvy. I am an internet researcher, so if I can understand the alias of the email address and take a couple of attempts, whether it's first name dot last initial, that's a good way to do it as well. But you also want to keep in mind that people are very protective of their personal information and email accounts. And so LinkedIn, if you can contact them directly in direct message, that's a great first place. Warm connections and introductions, to Mark and Kelsey's points earlier, are always great because that's a much easier conversation and it's some commonality because it's a shared network or contact. And then lastly, if you really are aggressive and an advocate for reaching out to that individual because there's a time-sensitive situation, then definitely try to get creative with figuring out their email account. But it would be warm introduction or recruiter message via LinkedIn would be my thoughts.
Okay, so in conclusion, let's wrap it up with one more kind of cool question that I think we have had prepared for this, and then I'll get each of our great panelists on to the rest of their days. In summation of everything we've talked about today, I'm hoping you all would share kind of one general piece of advice that you would share with your younger version of yourself when you think about career development, networking, all the things we've touched on. And Kelsey, I'll go to you as a way to kind of sum up what we've discussed. What's that advice you would give?
Don't wait for tomorrow to get started. The more that you can start reaching out to people, Des brought up at the very beginning, your church network, your high school, your college, your kickball league, start reaching out now. And that way you're starting out in a genuine conversation of, hey, I've done a bad job staying connected. I just wanted to reach out, see how you're doing. And then set that reminder to keep that process of at least once a month, check in with them. When's their kids' birthdays? When send a holiday card, a Christmas card. Because then by that point, 8 to 10 months down the road, if you do need something and you're like, hey, I saw you're connected, you already have a genuine relationship. So my biggest piece of advice is start today. Today, write down 10 to 15 people that are in your network that you haven't stayed connected with and reach out to them, and then set those reminders to make sure you're following up. That would be my biggest recommendation.
Desiree, let's go to you next.
So I would say, if I could tell my younger self anything, it would be take risks, be adventurous. I started off my career as a risk-averse individual. That's just being in HR and compliance. That's how I'm wired. And so if I could do anything differently, it would be, step outside of your comfort zone. The greatest opportunities and growth come from you being uncomfortable. And it's okay to fail. If you're going to fail fast. But take risk. Be willing to relocate if that's something that you can do personally. Be willing to take a step down, to take a couple of steps forward, depending on the nature of the work that you're doing and what your long-term goals are. And don't be too proud to ask for help. This is a time, especially now, where people are extremely empathetic and willing to reach out and help in any capacity. And so if you need help, ask and take risks. Get outside of your comfort zone. You're muted, Ryan.
Sorry, last but not least, Mark, what would be your piece of advice?
Yeah, I would, and I always, it was funny because I think as both Kelsey and Desiree were saying things, I'm like, shoot, that's what I was going to say. But I think the other thing would be, the only other thing I'd add there is again, depending on where you are in your life, I think some of the most successful people that I've ever met always have a mentor. So I would say that, and I'm sure that everybody can resonate here, that if you're, ask for a mentor, even if this is somebody who's like, oh my gosh, this person's so busy, this person's this, they're that, there's no way they would be offended, or they'd say, who are you to ask me to be your mentor? But I'd say that the times I've been blessed to be a mentor to somebody, it's, I've always been just flattered, and I've always tried to do everything I can for that individual. So really reach for somebody who you really just think, oh my gosh, this person is such a wealth of knowledge, that they're kind of like Star Wars and Yoda. This person knows everything, and they're so this and they're so that. It's okay. Ask them to be, ask them that, I would love it if you could be my mentor. And there's a good chance that person may say, yeah, I'd love to do that, because I think most people who are, depending on where they are in their career stages, where I am in my career after being in the career field for 30 years, I love to mentor people, and I'll do anything I can in my power to help somebody. So don't feel like you're going to offend somebody by asking for them to be your mentor, because I think in most cases people are going to be flattered, and they're going to be willing to try to help as much as they can.
Well, it's great from all three of you. And I wanted to say how much I appreciate and thankful I am for each of you, Mark, Desiree, and Kelsey, for joining us today. And thanks to everybody else that tuned into our program. Again, we recorded this. We will share the recording, and we're going to compile a document full of LinkedIn accounts, as well as different resources, both from our panelists and any resources that you all have shared with me via email as well. So I'll get that to you in the next couple of days. But again, to my great team of panelists, thank you guys for your time today.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.